record. Sorry guys, when you get the WeTransfer link with the video, there might be a few videos in there because I've had to stop and start. Sorry about that. No, that's not the one I wanted to show. There we go. Hopefully you can see this. Okay. I think as part of your itinerary as a functional skills teacher working on their speaking skills, and again, trying to make sure that our learners are getting their messages across that really they have language choices available, and certain choices like using slang and informal language is not going to work for them when they are in a formal exam situation, or if they're doing an interview, or they're in a working environment. Depending on the working environment, you know, normally, you know, it's got to be, you know, there are certain kind of language codes, isn't it? If you think about it, certain language codes that we all have to adhere to when we are working in a certain organization or doing a certain role. All right. And these codes are very unspoken, aren't they? They're just things that are just expected of people. But the learners may not be aware of that. All right. And that's okay. They're just, and to bring that awareness to the front, basically, here are some typical work-related speaking and listening situations that you might want to embed into your teaching strategy for your functional skills students, like responding to questions from colleagues and customers. There's lots of good videos on the BBC bite-sized functional skills. Some really good examples there of learners to listen to. And I've used them, and I've created listening comprehension activities of those videos. Following verbal instructions, that's really good. Do our students understand imperative form of the verbs, which make something like sound like an instruction? And also, how are our learners in asking questions? If we think about it, questions are an absolute key component of spoken communication skills. But when you start to observe and listen to your learners and how they speak, you know, do they just respond to your questions, or are they forthcoming enough to be able to ask questions? So I always train my students in how to ask questions. So I'll teach them open questions. I'll teach them closed questions. I'll teach them funks questions. I will teach them different ways of asking questions for them to be able to then play an active role in their communications, in a spoken communication skills. When I go out and observe candidates doing ESB speaking exams, the teachers have already trained them up on asking certain types of questions, variety of questions, using all the WH words and how, which, why, what, and whatever. You know, using complex sentences in your questions, like, you know, although or if, you know, starting questions with those, training students to do that. Now, isn't that marvelous? Because then in the speaking and listening component, learners are obviously going to have to participate in a discussion. They're going to have to ask questions, do turn taking. So that could be quite a powerful element to add into your, you know, in terms of your spoken oracy training of the students. Do our learners know how to greet each other, greeting colleagues and customers? Now there, dare I say, it's the teaching of the etiquette and certain mannerisms. Now, I'm not saying that learners don't have etiquette and mannerisms. I'm not saying that at all. But there are certain like conventions that have to be adhered to and obeyed if you are in a certain situation, okay? And are our learners aware of that? And you might have observed that they may not be. So the formal teaching of this is going to also add to their spoken itinerary. It's going to give them more choices. Using polite language in terms of, do our students understand things like being tactful or being diplomatic, or maybe toning down their use of language, particularly if they are veering towards a customer service type role. You know, I know lots of FE students that I've worked with in the past, they're wanting to work in a customer facing type role. And so we've had to work on their customer service skills using English, really important. So collaborating with colleagues on work, you know, how to work as a team. Do they know what utterances are going to be very powerful if they're working as a team? You know, shall I do this task? Do you want to do that? What do you think? What is your opinion? May I ask what your feelings are on the matter? Okay. So things of this nature can really help with telling our learners to do work-related activities. Taking verbal messages. Now, that's a really good listening comprehension. Again, do they need to use technical language or jargon to be able to do the work role? Now that may be something in their speaking and listening. I know that, you know, in the past when I've worked as an EQA for an examination board, and I've observed some live speaking, listening, functional skills assessments being taken place, that basically you've got the students being encouraged to use language to do with fundraising. Okay, crowdfunding came into conversations, charities came into the conversation, etc., etc. Sponsored this and sponsored that. You know, all these are quite specific terminologies around the topic of the speaking, listening, and communication. We're getting a few messages on chat. Let me keep an eye on that. Let me also keep an eye on the participants. Hope no one's waiting. No. Fabulous. Any other comments? Yeah, okay. Joe's saying, E3 writing, one of the students started email with the friend with Wagwan. Okay. Okay, right. Okay, that's good. You have your, that's okay. No worries. That's fine. I'm just gonna, right. Okay. So, and also, it's also worth noting elements of what a good speaker actually does, and also what a good listener does. Okay, in terms of things that we need to be making sure we're working towards. You know, good speakers, they relate to the listener. They're respectful of others. They encourages trust, shows empathy, purposeful and clear. They use appropriate vocabulary. They speak with fluency. For example, do you do much fluency practice with your students? Do you work on their speed, for example, in terms of their vocal delivery? Are they speaking too fast? Are they speaking too slow? Are they using monotone? Okay, fluency, this is really important. Are they confident? Is what they're saying is credible? Are they being approachable and responsive? Are they using body language well? Because that's the other thing as well. When they're speaking, 50–60% of their spoken communication could be done through the way they're using their body and their hands. Normally, when I'm doing face-to-face training, I am, like I'm now being quite animated. I, use my arms and whatever and to help me with my speaking and my expression. So do they enable participation? Do they know how to invite other people, or do they dominate? Do they dominate conversation? Now that's not good. It's good in the sense they're confident, but then it's not equalizing contributions. Do they know how to equalize contributions and listen, switch off and listen? Okay. Do they know what to leave out and maybe not go to OTT with the information that may not be appropriate? Okay. Can they generate interest in a topic? Do they know how to do that? Maybe they've watched a lot of YouTube videos and maybe they know how to do it from watching other people and bring that experience in. Some of them do watch lots of videos. Maybe some of them in your functional skill classes can recite. Example, just 1 second, sorry. Hello? Can leave it down, mate. Thank you. Okay. Sorry guys, you can tell I'm home-based. I've just had a delivery from Amazon, so they just left it outside the door. I'll pick it up in about 5 minutes. All right, guys. Okay, sorry, what was I saying? Right, okay, I'm going through my list here. Do they know how to generate interest? Do they know how to draw an audience in? Now, I reckon a lot of our post-16 learners will have a pretty good idea because they watch lots of videos on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram stories, etc. Some of them are on LinkedIn. There's lots of videos on LinkedIn as well. So do encourage your learners to bring forward examples of videos they've watched, which actually show how the speaker can draw people in. And then for you to bring that into your teaching, that can be really powerful. Even if you have to show some Instagram stories in your teaching, why not? If it does the trick, then try it. Also, how to use pitch, pace, tone. What I tend to do is I like to play examples on a video or listening comprehension, examples of someone speaking, and with a very loud pitch, with a very with a voice which is not very well paced. The tone is very sharp, and I want them to identify what's good, bad, and ugly about the pitch, pace, and tone. So we have a discussion about it. Then I get them to analyze their own use of pitch, pace, and tone. And then what I then do in the face-to-face class, if I was teaching face-to-face, I would get them to record their voices on their voice recorder on their phone, play it back, analyze it, analyze your own voice for pitch, pace, and tone. Okay, that's also really quite telling as well. With some of the elements of a good speaker, they may not be aware of things like vocabulary and content. So what I then do is encourage students to speak to a voice recognition type app like List Note. So if they speak into it and they record it, then the software will then translate their spoken words into written words, and then it produces written text, and then they can then email to themselves, they can then do spell checks, and then they get an idea of what they're saying, okay? So how they're saying and what they're saying, you can pick these up by encouraging them to use their phones. I think mobile phones could be our secret weapon here in developing them into good speakers. Do any of you have any further ideas? I mean, for example, for me personally, if I was going to develop a spoken oracy course for functional skills, speaking and listening, this would be my scheme of work. All these elements of a good speaker would be my scheme of work, and I would have little activities and techniques that I would be drilling into my students and then getting them to practice. And the thing about teaching, speaking and listening is you have to, sometimes for me as a teacher, I'm doing my own experience here, when I'm teaching speaking and listening skills, I myself as a teacher have to be quite demonstrative. I have to show and tell. I have to present, I have to increase my own profile to do lots of demonstrations with my learners for them to be able to get the message. So I use myself as a demonstration model, okay? And if they can see me demonstrating it, then allow them, that's another valuable exposure, as well as watching videos, as well as listening to other people. This can be really good. Yes, Joe, role play telephone techniques, really good. That's excellent. That's really good. Get them to record their voice to text. This is what I do, Natasha. Amazing stuff. And also, guys, how do you know that your learners are good listeners? If we are building on their receptive listening skills, my God, not only are they going to become brilliant in their functional skills, they're going to improve their ability to, as general communicators, as people, it may well improve their relationships with their friends, with their partners, with their family, their friends, community, teachers, okay? So it's really good investment to make sure they know what it means to be a good listener. And this is where your dedicated work as an English language practitioner on a post-16 functional skills program can do the magic. It really can be the catalyst. So for example, to be a good listener is easy to talk to, shows respect. They focus on the speaker. They do head nodding. They don't interrupt or interject. They make supportive comments. Do our learners know how to do that? Do our learners know how to make supportive comments? Okay. Do they actually move the conversation along? Do they know how to interrupt or interject rather? Concentrate on what appears to be attentive or not, create an atmosphere of trust, pick out the main points, reflect back, paraphrases, understands feelings, remembers, able to infer. My goodness, do they know what someone is suggesting? Okay, by listening to them and listening out for their tone and watching their body language. If you can build on their inferential skills in listening, my goodness me, I'm just thinking of level 1 reading where they have to infer from images or they have to infer from text for level 2, for example. This is a very, very powerful skill, but it requires building their metacognition skills as well, their ability to think about it, all right, using their subconscious mind. So work on their inferential skills. Know when to ask a question and not just butt in. Pardon to use the word butt in there, but yeah, this is what our learners do sometimes. And we've just got to advise them on when it works, when it doesn't work. And do they feel comfortable with silence? It's okay to just be silent. Let there be a pause in the conversation. Let people think before they speak. That's a good thing. Can they make links with existing knowledge and other things? Can they network their pragmatic knowledge? Does it delve them deeper into their subconscious mind to get them to reveal more insights? Brilliant, because the subconscious mind is a home of wisdom. So they could be able to share lots of good golden nuggets with everybody else and the teacher, and using appropriate body language. I mean, I've done sessions on speaking and listening for their exam for their functional skills exam. When we look at body language, I teach them appropriate body language. And as part of their ESB assessment in schools and colleges, basically that's part of the teaching, that's part of the curriculum. The learners need to know how to use appropriate body language, facial gestures. So their facial gestures are cognizant with the verbal delivery, okay? Because some learners, they may, depends on how they come across, but they may not be aware of how they come across and how it may not be cognizant with how they're speaking, what they're meant to be saying. So it's about getting an alignment and collaboration. And that can be a difficult one, okay? But again, you know, if it's appropriate and if it's acceptable for the learners to be filmed, how they're taking part in a pair activity, and for that to be shown to them privately or as a class activity, again, that's always really good for analysis and feedback, okay? Learners do need to get feedback on how they speak and how they listen. But we may be thinking that the feedback is more on their written work or their reading comprehension. But yes, but we can also give feedback on how they listen, how they speak. Okay, guys, now that is now coming to the end of the speaking and listening. Okay, that's speaking and listening more or less finished. Are there any, while we're going to lunch now, are there any comments or any other things that come to mind, guys? Has that been helpful? That's fine, Shirley, no problem. Any thoughts? Oh dear, Natasha. Yes, I do have a strategy. What you could do is, if it helps, you could use list notes yourself, and you could just say immediately after doing an assessment or something, you could speak into it, and then you'll then be able to get your notes written for you. So you could use a speech to text app rather than, and then you'll have the text there, and then you'll then be able to use it. I mean, did you all know that if, say, for example, if some of you are able to, you know, I mean, like in some cases, for example, some of my private clients have said, well, Sunil, can we have a written version of your podcast? So what I do, because I've got my own YouTube channel, I'll send them the actual YouTube link, and then above the description box there are three pins, well, three dots, and one of them says open transcript. And then as long as you deselect toggle, then basically you have everything that I said written out in Word. All right. So if some of the you know, the speaking and listening is recorded on audio and video and banged and put onto YouTube, and then it can then get the transcript that way, that can save you a whole heap of work. Okay, right. No worries, Vicky. I don't know what happened. I'm so sorry. I think what it is, I think maybe the college email IT system is not accepting my private email, my Outlook email. You can either send me a private one, or I think work is being done for your ICT department to allow my email to go through to your inboxes. Someone's mentioned QWIQR is a good speech app. Never heard of that. That's good. Create a QR code, then scan, then access my verbal feedback. Very, very good. Not come across that. So that's great. Okay, so please, guys, can you also look at list notes, okay, which is a speech to text app. Try that, guys. Okay. Are there any other questions or queries? You found that useful? Any afterthoughts? It is one of my favorite areas, actually, of English teaching. I always go to town on speaking and listening. For me, it's very underrated in the national curriculum per se. I mean, I think it's a travesty that students on GCSE courses, that they're not weighted on the speaking and listening, but they have to do it. You know, it's such a shame. But at least for functional skills, it is what, a third of the whole thing. So yeah, Paula, mine too. It is my favorite part. It's my favorite part, but also the power of developing their oracy listening skills, for that to be a catalyst to power their reading and writing. That's what I love. I just love that to bits. Any advice to calm dominant speakers, encourage more reluctant ones? Yes, Joe, I'd say, for example, Peter, that's fine. And I'd even show my hand, say, Peter, that's great, that's wonderful, you know? And what I would do, I would summarize the gist of what Peter said. Then I'd say, right, now I'm going to hand it over now to John and to Rachel, okay? So that gives the impression to Peter that the teacher is managing the interactions, they want them balanced. He is respecting what I've said because he summarized it. Now he's bouncing it to others. So the student knows in a nice way that this is not this person's show. Okay, and I'm pretty good at doing that. I learned to do that really well in prison, where, my goodness, you would not believe how many wanted to talk. But it was a powerful thing because they wanted to express, but I had to equalize it across the board. Then if Peter doesn't speak, okay, what I then do is then if they don't respond to open questions, I go to Funk's questions. Because with Funk's questions, you give them multiple choices. So Peter, what do you think this text is about? Is it about apples, oranges, bananas? He has to give me a response. And then if he doesn't know what, then I'll then repeat something again. I'll use a Feynman technique, reteach, and get him to speak. But I'm not going to leave that interaction without him speaking. Because Peter needs to know the teacher is going to work hard for that student and is going to make sure he participates. Because what I don't want is reticent students disempowering themselves with reticent when there's an opportunity for me to work on their confidence skills. That's how to work on Peter. Then hopefully Peter has enough confidence to freely speak and then hopefully dominate the class in the future. Amazing stuff. Thank you so much, Joe. Any other questions or queries? Now you'll find there's lots more slides and handouts in this module because normally, as I said, we do this over a whole day, but I've given you the most important bits. So guys, okay, right, so the no more questions. So I will then switch off my video and audio and I'll be back in about 35 minutes to let people back in. So have a good break, guys. See you in a bit.